Okay, we should be back live. So I wanted to start with a kind of broad question to get your thoughts on what you thought of the role reversal in the video generally. Did it alter your views on some of the social issues that were addressed, or how did that impact you? Sharon, do you want to start?
Well, thank you. Thank you, Allison, for the invitation to be here tonight. Thank you to all the other panelists and to all of you watching in Facebook Live. It was 8 minutes and 16 seconds of a video that changed really my mind. I really thought that I understood what discrimination was as a female who had always pursued role in what I classify as the man's world. I really thought that I understood discrimination based on my view of, gender discrimination, sexual harassment in those occasions through my life. But those were clips of time in my life. And really what I've thought of in this 8 minutes, it brought me to a wow moment that really did change the way I perceived what discrimination really was for other individuals, and to look at it through the world of everything every day. And I thought it was the most effective way to communicate that message. And while I have other things to say, I'll let everyone else answer the question.
Jennifer, I saw you nodding a bit there. Did you want to jump in?
Sure. I also felt that it brought a different level of consciousness as to how much is ingrained in the commercial industry when you see the billboards and the advertisements and every aspect of life that the systemic racism can cause and effect. And it really had an effect on me that really not only brought that level of consciousness, but it also showed me how important art is in articulating those things and the multiple dimensions that art can really bring to light when you're looking at how to affect change.
Okay, Rick or Nia, do you guys want to jump in?
I guess I'll jump in. I agree with Justice Kennedy. For me, this was very transformative. I saw my son. The video it pulls you in, because as a white person watching it at first, you don't know what you're experiencing, and you don't understand that you're about to go into another universe, an alternate reality where you're the minority all of a sudden, and you don't catch it at first. It kind of draws you in from the oatmeal that you're pouring is not Quaker oats, to the Jesus on the wall is not your skin color, to walking down the street and not feeling safe. It actually makes you feel as if you are in a position where you need to have allies, where it's not the norm for you. And you see yourself as a young man, or you see your son in the actor that's playing the role, and you're hoping for the best for him. But he's got obstacles. And those obstacles, as Justice Kennedy was explaining, they're there every day. They're there every day, and everything that you see that you're bombarded with. And so it does change your perspective. You're walking literally in somebody else's shoes, figuratively, I should say. You're there, but it's not you until you realize this could be you.
To some of those points, Rick, I thought it was interesting to note the moment that you notice that the roles are reversed, because it doesn't hit me immediately. I didn't think of it necessarily when you see them wake up on a mattress on the floor. They're single white mothers, they're economically advantaged white people, but it was the advertisements and the religious artifacts in the home that really had it sink in. Okay, something's different here, because I've never seen a Black crest family, melanin oats don't exist. Jesus is Black here. And so that's when it also hit me that something was different in this reality, that things were going to be different on this walk. And I was curious at others' thoughts on if seeing different Black experiences or even social cues, like the way that they greet each other with the dap, where they grab hands, or racial profiling with the police in the Moorbucks or the Starbucks. Did seeing those behaviors depicted through a white individual change your view of them? Are some behaviors scary because Black people are doing them? And when you saw a white person doing them, are they now less concerning? Or did you start to still associate some of those behaviors as scary or undesirable?
I thought, and I don't know if you're passing the ball to me, but at the point where I felt very uncomfortable was in the Starbucks, where you're there and you're not caught up. First of all, everybody's innocent in that Starbucks, and people are making some judgments very, very quickly about you. And when the actor puts up his hands just to signal to the police, it's not me, but then get pulled into everything so quickly. That for me was very uncomfortable, and that's when you can actually see that. That's when it actually really dawns on you what this means.
I was gonna join in, and basically, first I wanted to start off by saying the video was great. It really, like, I've thought of, me and my friends have had these conversations, and like Wale got to bring it into like life. He got to actually make the piece that we've been talking about, and specifically about the Moorbuck situation. I thought it was really interesting on how basically the roles were reversed. And first I want to start off by saying that I think this video was made for people who are on the outside looking in onto like problems that that Black people have already like experienced and stuff. So I thought it was really interesting on how we saw that, like, even though the main character, he wasn't even involved with the situation, he got pulled out and at the same time too. And I believe that situation was a representation on how in Philadelphia 2 Black men got arrested for no reason in a Starbucks. And I thought that was cool because that didn't really happen. I mean, another Black man who didn't have anything to do with it didn't get pulled out. But I thought that was really cool how they brought the main character into that too, just so they can say like they're just showing us how exaggerated and how real it is, basically. I thought it was pretty cool on how he brought that image.
I was also curious on your all thoughts about the chorus, "Sue me, I'm rooting for everybody that's Black." So I went back to English class and kind of broke it down into 2 pieces. Sue me, to me, said this isn't going to be politically correct, and I'm rooting for everybody that's Black. I took that as no one else is standing up for us, so we need all Black people to stand and support other Black people. And going back to the advertisements and not normally seeing Black faces on advertisements, and as a dark-skinned woman, especially not seeing other dark-skinned Black people on advertisements and being comfortable with that in our homes and just used to that. I think there's also a message in there for the Black community, because oftentimes we don't necessarily support small independent Black businesses. We only see them as worthwhile or successful once they've gotten into a big chain store, or other Black people can be quick to judge Black people with the way they dress or some of their actions and say, well, you put yourself in that situation. So I was curious on what the other panelists' thoughts were on that chorus. I'm rooting for everybody that's Black.
So I can say the first time I heard someone saying that, and I believe he cited Issa Rae in the lyrics, is when Issa Rae responded to her correspondent at an award show, and they asked her, "Who do you hope wins tonight?" And she said, "I'm rooting for everybody Black." Like, that's it. I'm rooting for everybody Black to win. And that comment garnered a lot of criticism because it was seen as a separatist and divisive comment. But the reality is when you have the Grammys, majority of Black folks don't win. So that's where I remember and I recollected that that statement coming from. And then the sue me is, hey, too bad. This is what it is. We need to start rooting for everybody that's Black, because the likelihood of us winning is low in a world that doesn't see us as winners. And I strongly am one to like root for everybody Black, especially Black folks that are looking to improve and uplift Black people. But when he says sue me, it's almost like, hey, I know this is not going to be a popular statement, but this is reality. And he's showing what reality is, right? And why he's doing that and why he's saying that. So I love that chorus. Definitely.
I think the lyrics are meant to be in your face, as I would say. That the sue me words for me was, I don't care what you think, but this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to root for Black people. And I think the lyrics are in your face like that. But I go back to the medium of the art. And if it's only a call to Black people to support one another, then I think the video would have been different, because I think the video was made for people who are white, people of different ethnicity, who can actually look at that video and have that wow moment. Where, as Rick said, you see that self-identification in the white young boy sitting there and getting his brother off to school. And there's that visual connection for you, as Rick would say, because you're drawn into that experience. You see it as yourself. But then there's this visceral response to it of what's happening here is unfair, unjust. And that's where my view of what he was teaching me in that 8 minutes and 16 seconds flipped the switch, because he was really challenging my past ideas of what I thought I knew about discrimination, that there isn't a true understanding of walking a mile in those shoes, because you can't walk the mile in those shoes. As I said, opening with the video, to me, I had faced gender, sex discrimination, but it wasn't indicative of my everyday life. There were opportunities where I was able to move beyond that. And I had to watch the video probably 5 times before I got to read every single one of the billboards or the communication devices of the media that people work through commercialization. That billboard of more kinky hair that he's looking at and looking at the white face, or being afraid of the person with the ski mask, or the whole pull your pants up, and it's the white person, you can be more than just that if you pull your pants up. All of those kinds of things. Really, I guess I was oblivious to the commercial aspects of that voice. So I actually think he wrote it for both perspectives. He wrote it to change all of us.
And I don't know if a lot of white people would have seen the video if it hadn't been shared by Black folks who are like in unity with people who are not Black, like just by proximity of me sharing it with Jerry and then Jerry sharing it with you. I don't know if you or Rick would have seen that video or even known it was out had we not said, hey, let's make sure that this thing gets spread across our circles. You know what I mean?
At my level of technology, I don't see anything on computers. I'm the old generation. I still like my paper.
I didn't see that this was something that the artist was always going to feel. I took it to mean like, hey, until you help me make things different, this is the way I feel, and this is the right that I have to feel this way. So I didn't feel judgmental about that because the visuals had already changed your mind and changed your heart to the point where, okay, I get it. And now if I want to listen to this, what is it that I'm willing to do? And you had to kind of understand that the artist wasn't going to always be that way, always think that way. If if you and he were working together. So that was my thoughts, anyways. I think that we take these privileges that we have for granted, that not everybody has. We're not just talking about basic rights here, but we're all endowed with certain inalienable rights, right? But we are talking about an aspirational equality. But the next level that you must get to now would be that equity, and not to have disparity. And that's what I think what the video overall meant to me, and I think means to the majority of people, whether you're white or black. I think that's what they come away with. So I thought it was very, very well done.
Another thing that I liked is within the video, as you're watching it and as they're showing us in a different perspective and a different race on how different like our issues are shown through a different person, like they flipped to the actual videos. Like when in the More Bucks, they flipped to the Starbucks video of the actual 2 Black men getting arrested, or like at the end of the video they flipped to the people in the jail basically talking about how I like that they really brought it in, like no, this is actually going on. We actually need to commit change and actually need to change things, and it's just showing us that this is more real than this video. Like this is actually going on, and I like that.
I was going to say that's an important point, because I know there's sometimes skepticism, especially when you see art, that things are exaggerated or that things are just kind of the one person's perspective. But by paralleling the actual events that happened to Black people, or even with some of the newspaper articles about stop and frisk or just incendiary comments, you can see that this isn't an exaggeration. Those were actually words that were shared and spoken about Black people, but now you're seeing how it would feel if they've been spoken about a white person. So that's a really good point, Nia, that he almost provided source material and said, here's where my art's coming from. These actually happened to people in the real world, in modern day, not in the past, like we sometimes like to think about racist acts.
Yes. Thank you. And I also feel like watching the video, since it's like a whole flipped reverse reality, that like you said, the melanin oats and like the billboards basically showing like, and like it could seem like an exaggeration, but I like that he brought it back to reality with implementing the actual videos into it.
And I was going to say it's because it seems like it could be ridiculous, right? If you're watching that and you have no frame of reference, like this is ridiculous. How is this happening? But the fact that he did parallel it brings it to light that this is actually happening, and it is ridiculous, right? How ridiculous it actually is.
Yeah, in that same vein, with a less serious topic, one of the billboards had whitepeoplemeet.com. And when I saw it, it seemed kind of silly to me because it just doesn't seem necessary. But it's the idea that you aren't necessarily going to find a group of people of your race as the majority in any group that you enter. So if you go on a dating app, the pool of Black people that are also there won't necessarily be as big, and you might want a group and a community that focuses on that. So even again, from my perspective, it was interesting to see the roles reversed and just how, again, maybe some things we have internalized, like you said, Jennifer, and just gotten used to and comfortable with. But when you stop and think about it, it's kind of like, oh, okay, wow, like we're creating spaces because they're not just the mainstream all the time.
And it was very empowering to know that we can shape our own world. That was the other thing that I took from it, was like, this is an entirely different alternate universe that we actually have control in our real life, real time, to make our own reality the way we want it, right? Like it really kind of shape shifted the way I envision how we can create something more equitable than what we have. Things don't just have to be the way that they are. So it was really powerful for me in that way as well.
Well, to me, that begins the conversation. So I look at my history with I've worked in the justice system my entire life. And as I said to Jerry that day that I played it, and it was so powerful to me about a perspective of my world in which I have come from, whether that was being a lawyer and solving a client's problems, or being a trial court judge, or now a justice. So much of what we do falls outside of someone else's purview, that having seen it from his perspective and having that understanding and feeling and recognizing how much we do in isolation that people don't know about, don't understand. I also think it's a great tool to bring about change, because if it was so impactful to me, how many others would be so impacted? So I shared it with my friends, and all of my friends had the same response, because I interviewed them afterwards, because I wanted to know what they thought, to see if I had a wide, distorted view of what I was seeing, but every single one said the same thing back. And that led me to, this video is about how do you change the world? And by showing me a different perspective, I think you can change the world. As lawyers, we do continuing legal education programs all the time. And as judges, we do professionalism, ethics training, diversity training. And I said to Jerry, I just look at this as what a gift to be able to create a continuing legal education program for judges, and to do the traditional things that we would do in diversity training, but to end it with this and allow them to sit there and think about what they think about and how that video affects them. Because if it affected me and my friends, it has to affect them as well.
I did something very similar. I took it to my kids, my 4 kids, and I asked them if they knew who the artist was, and yes, and if they had watched it and seen it. They had heard the song, but they hadn't seen the video. So when they saw the video, I don't think it rocked their world. They agreed with it immediately. So it's something that that I was glad to see, that somehow they had already had this transformational experience, that the video didn't need to take them there. But I also know, as Justice Kennedy's saying, we lawyers that work in the system all day long, you're with other lawyers, unless you're talking to your clients, and hopefully you're learning lessons from them. But we're dealing with people that oftentimes are of our own socioeconomic status, and so it's not easy to be able to have these opportunities. So I agree that these are things that you can actually use. It starts the conversation and it can end the conversation very quickly. If people understand that this is, and they feel the same way. I think that if somebody in your family is hurting, like my daughter, my son, my wife, and they're trying to get a point across to you, you have a choice to either engage them and speak to them and find them wherever they are. If they're in the bedroom or the basement or the garage, and you have a duty to, as a father or as a family member, to go see them and see why are you hurting? What is it? Make me understand. And this video does that in a way that's you're anonymous, and so you don't have to really have that emotional engagement. And so I truly appreciate that. But I think if we see each other as all being connected and part of this greater family, this community, this society that we're in, if you're truly loving and caring about your family member, you're going to go out and you're going to ask them, what's wrong? What have I done? What am I not seeing that needs to, and how do I need to change? And simply to listen, to listen and to learn.
So I'm sure as panelists, we've all probably watched the video at least twice. even if that were partly tonight. So with this being the solution, were there any things that sparked in your mind that could be action items or next steps to address some of the issues that were brought up in the video? What can we do to change that reality and that narrative that's currently in place?
I can say primarily because I work on equitable civic engagement, voter mobilization, and really trying to highlight the gaps that exist for people to be actively engaged in our voting system and in democracy. Looking at art as a conduit and as a vehicle to really illustrate how something as easy as voting, right? Easy can be easy for some and not for others, right? And how our systems look, and really being able to articulate and illustrate the parallels and the dynamics in a way that is very clear, but also dynamic. And really urging our folks in public service to listen and pay attention and to be engaged in that process. Because as you've seen, like the power of artistic expression can go a long way in influencing how we move forward in our respective positions and how we're engaging with folks. So I think that taking this example and really trying to transform the way that we do engagement and the way that we really try to amplify the gaps that exist for people participating in democracy is really something that I'm looking at as a solution for how to better improve our systems and to get more people activated in a way that's equitable and accessible.
Okay, I'll go. I think that the video was a great start to people who may say that I don't see it. I don't see racism. I don't see what you're talking about. I think it's a good way for people to look and like, this is it. This is what's happening. And I think it's really just a mental battle between everybody. And I think it's just something we just have to start within ourselves and just start becoming more self-conscious to what's basically going on and like helping that situation out ourselves, because it's not going to happen if we don't do it.
And I think that change begins with the conversation that Jennifer and Nia are talking about, which within my world of working in the justice system, I think that is where you can make, or I could make, an improvement in fostering change, allowing others that would not ordinarily see this, see it and allow them to, without challenging their thought process, without creating a controversy, allowing them to see it and think about them and allow them to think for themselves. How does it affect their world? And what are they seeing and what can they do to bring change? Because I truly believe the more people who see it, the more people who are going to engage the topic and find the solutions that we all want.
If I can weigh in here, I've been listening to what African-American leaders have been saying that we need to do as far as solutions and their thoughts, because I think so oftentimes you try to rush to the solution, and the solution needs to come from the right perspective, the right angle, the right and there has to be a building of consensus. But from what I'm hearing and what I'm learning is that there needs to be some specifics about what it is that we want to change, what it is that the community wants to change. So we can set specific goals and we can have people that are in agreement with that. So as the justice system is not just law enforcement, but it's also judges, it's prosecutors, it's lawyers, and we have a bar and we have to start setting that bar higher than where it's at right now. And so how do you do that? You have to have these conversations, and you have to start talking about holding yourself as a public servant accountable to the public. You have to be transparent. You have to keep data. Personally, I mean to and intend to and will keep sentencing data in order to make sure that people can hold me accountable as to what type of sentences are provided or given, whether it's community-controlled sanctions, probation, or if there has to be a prison term for somebody who's done something awful, to make sure that they're equitable, that they're not disparate. So you have to talk about real things that different people in the system as a whole can do. What can mayors do? What can lawyers do? What can prosecutors do? And what can judges do? All of that, and anybody else that we think. And I think we have to then be very specific and then come back and hold people accountable. I think that's how we make specific change.
And I can say, just to add into that, being very clear about what equity looks like and what we want equity to look like aspirationally. How does that feed into things like accountability, right? And being very clear as to what our vision and our aspirations are for what we want. And I think that is part of the solution, is to actually have tactile examples of what equity can look like. Because we already know what it doesn't, I know what it doesn't look like. So trying to say what we do want, and articulating that and presenting that in a way that is artistic, that is dynamic, and that can really compel people and drive people to work towards it, for sure.
Yeah, I think the central theme amongst all of your responses has been that it starts with conversations and discussions amongst groups of people that come from different backgrounds and perspectives. And the great thing about this piece being a video is that it can be widely shared. It can start flowing into different training sessions or curriculums. And it starts with that understanding of there is a problem. Back to what Nia said, as far as some people just not seeing an issue, maybe to start with, and they're coming in thinking, well, I know this is what you think, but I just don't see it. But once you see a different perspective, you see yourself put into those scenarios, you might come out with a different feeling. So I think that's a really apt point, that it starts with getting people together and having open engagement and dialogue, because sometimes people shy away from these conversations and might feel that they're going to be uncomfortable or they'll be judged. But having a space to talk about racial issues and societal injustices is definitely part of getting to a solution. So I would second that. So did anyone else have any thoughts that we haven't touched on in the video? Was there anything that really struck you, or even just has stayed with you since your first viewing, or any viewings after the first? But
I think what stayed with me was the very last clip of the Black man who was incarcerated and was sharing the audio and the video from his phone, which I'm pretty sure is illegal, right? And the fact that we wouldn't have had that perspective if he hadn't had access to whatever he had to share that with everyone. We need that. Why is that not legal? Why can't people share what's going on? And I think that we have to be very clear about what was powerful in that video and in that art, and what allowed us to have insight into things that we would have otherwise not known. People went through a lot of those experiences firsthand. Those are traumatic experiences, so they should not go in vain, right? I think that we have to tip our hats to the man at the end of the video who was sharing his insight and his pain, but then also acknowledge that the way that he did that is not something that's allowed, right? So we have to make these things accessible and make them real, because we wouldn't have been informed of that had we not had that lens. So it points to some issues and some problems, but it also points to possible solutions, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, that saying something live and something raw that we normally just wouldn't be able to tap into. We think of prisons and those incarcerated as kind of just a distant part of society that we don't interact with and see every day, outside of maybe those in the justice system and the criminal justice system specifically. But we hear about issues and maybe think about them for a moment, donate, and then they get put on the back burner. But being able to see someone struggle and their fear and hear their pleas firsthand reaches people. And that goes back to what Rick was saying about accountability. If we're not able to see what's happening, how will the public know? And how will they then try to hold someone accountable to bring about change? So that's a very good point.
It took an award-winning artist to create a video for us to have this conversation here in Ohio. I would hope that it wouldn't take that for us to be able to have this conversation again, right? So what do we do now to ensure that that doesn't have to happen in order for this to keep happening?
Does anyone else have any final thoughts about pieces or moments from the video that touched you, or even as you've had conversations with your own networks and communities, things that you've heard from some of your friends and colleagues that you've shared this video with that inspired you, that things are moving in a positive direction?
Well, the prisoner at the end, I agree with you, Jennifer, that it's haunting, because he was definitely scared. He was scared for his life. He had a mask on, as we all have done during this pandemic period. And he was warning everybody about what was happening in prison and how everybody was now coming down with COVID-19. And he was clearly genuine, not just concerned for his own life, but for other people there in the prison. And then it cuts off and it leaves you wanting. It leaves you wanting to hear more, to see if why did it all of a sudden, music stop, everything stopped. And so it is haunting. And so for the people that I've shared it with, they want to know more about that. They want to know more about the prison system, this issue of mass incarceration, and what's being done in order to protect the people prior to them contracting something that now we have to deal with. And so it's bringing up this other issue, this incarceration issue, as far as how much is too much time, and how are we protecting ourselves as a community from this. And this virus is, it should be bringing us together. It should be bringing us together for common solutions rather than dividing us. But this is definitely something that I think is left for the next piece of this conversation. It's left a very clear starting point that can be tackled. As I said before, there's all parts of the system that can be examined. But I think it's important to start taking one piece at a time and say, let's have a conversation about this piece next. Okay. And I think that's, if we stay focused on that, just having a conversation at a time about each of these, and then you can perhaps come up with some solutions that the community leaders are pointing us towards.
I think that last scene really drove home for me what Nia was saying. She liked the blending of what was the thought process for making the video of what the experience was for this young man. And then they overlaid it with real incidents that you could see, the Starbucks. But right before you cut to that very last scene, that young man is playing chess with his father, and he's saying, there's a new law. It really applies to you. You'll have the opportunity to apply to get released. And the father doesn't want to hear anything about it because he is resigned himself to the situation that he'll never get out. He won't be one of the ones. And he's got 4 years left on his sentence. Let's just be quiet and play chess. And then you cut away to that individual where there was a movement to allow individuals who were in institutional settings that they could get a release as a result of COVID-19. And to me, that fear of what he was saying in that end clip, and then it literally cuts off and you don't know what happens to him then. It really took me back to that moment in the video where the father is just saying, it is not possible for someone like me. It's stacked against me. And I think those are the kind of thought-provoking issues that I think this video brings to anyone who sees it. And at the end of watching it, if you don't believe you are part of the solution, then you didn't watch the same video I did. It's not possible.
I was gonna say the same thing. I think we all had the same type of experience with the ending, and I thought like the ending and how exactly what Miss Kennedy was saying, how that he was like, this is not for me. That law is not going to benefit me. It's just not built for me. And then the transition into him explaining how what they're going through and how the system isn't built for them, and like this is actually happening. And I just thought that I thought that it was cool that we all had that same experience with the ending.
And did it not hit closer to home too, because the inmate was in Ohio? So not only was it about a real life experience and something that another human was going through and that we should feel compassion for because it's just a person truly experiencing it, but it was in our own state. So we all, especially those of us in the legal community, can have a say and a part in righting that wrong. So, Jennifer, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, as an organizer with the coalition here in Ohio, I know it's been challenging to get voices from the inside because a lot of people who have been released are very traumatized. So if these types of videos and this sort of capturing and documentation is helpful, it's something that I want to definitely bring back to my people and say we need to get more of this sort of documentation. If I know it's going to move folks like you as a lawyer and judges and prosecutors, because this is something that we've been really trying to articulate. And typically protests is the first, avenue. But if this is something that can work, I think our efforts and our energy should go more into this and really getting more voices from the inside. And using art as a lens and as a vehicle. So I appreciate everyone's input. It's really been helpful in learning.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I know we're going to run out of time, but I just wanted to say thank you, Allison, for moderating. Thank you, everyone, to allow me to be on the panel. And I would say some of that movement, Jennifer, does happen, and it's slow to take shape. But I think about some of the legislation that I've seen in the last 3 years to really try to not incarcerate nonviolent offenders, to try to find alternatives to incarceration, to use those tools. I think of the justice system, as Rick said, as larger than just lawyers and law enforcement and judges. It's parole and probation and all those other entities that are a part of that system. But it's also communities. It's communities like yours, communities that develop programs to help those who are on, pretrial release, pretrial diversion, community control, not to end up being incarcerated. I want to know, how can we build the community, what I call the safety net, the safe place for them to come so that they make sure that they're making the most out of this opportunity so they never become institutionalized. So as a practicing attorney, I spent a lot of time working with juvenile offenders. And the last thing I wanted to see was them to go to DYS, because I knew what that life would be and the likelihood of a return or an incarceration into the adult system. So working on community programs to try and help support them, and what was the safety net that I could build with their family or beyond their family. So I think that is an exciting conversation that I think we can all have as well. Being one.
Yes, I think that's a very good point to end on. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight, sharing your input and engaging with this video. I'm very happy to hear that so many of you have shared it beyond those who are tuning in and watching on Facebook Live, and I hope that it continues to be a discussion point in Ohio, beyond, nationally. And I know that we've all seen recently with national and also international protests that things locally can spark a change and a voice that continues to move throughout different communities and really touch people across different socioeconomic classes, races, nationalities. So having these types of discussions is definitely part of moving forward and getting to progress and change. So I want to thank everybody. If nobody else has any additional points that you want to share, we'll wrap up here.
Just to thank you, Allison, and my fellow panelists, Nia and Jennifer and Justice Kennedy. I agree with everything that Justice Kennedy has just said. We released many people from the county jail up in the Cleveland area, and we haven't seen a wholesale rise in crime. But because of this pandemic, because of this virus, you can see that there is hope to do things a different way. And I think that as long as we don't slide back into the way that we were doing things, business as usual, but learn from what we've been able to do together over the past 2-3 months, then we'll be able to hopefully come up with more of these solutions, as Justice Kennedy said, in order to find these alternative ways of being able to deal with people rather than housing them. So
I just wanted to say I was grateful for the opportunity to come on here and hear all the different perspectives and learn from all the different perspectives from Ms. Lumpkin, Mr. Bell, Ms. Kennedy, Ms. Smith. I really appreciate it. I'm gonna leave here with some more knowledge to go to my friends to implement the solution practically.
Thank you, everyone. I've learned from everyone, each and every one of you, and I'm excited to see what happens next.